Well, I want to thank those of you present for joining us this evening, and anyone online. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's Open Space Committee, and we're going to start with the call to order and roll call, starting with Dell.
Hello, Dell Maxwell, present for the meeting.
Terry,
Terry Lee, present.
All right, this is Gary and I'm here.
And Nona, I'm here.
all right.
And Jackie, I'm here.
And this is Betsy Morgan Thaler serving as chair for a little while longer. With that, I would like to ask you to turn to the minutes before you, and if there be no edits. Oh, so sorry, oral communications. I skipped right over oral communications. Welcome, Carter. You're just here to check in belatedly. Carter War arriving at 5:31. Kind of on the nose. All right. So sorry, I skipped over oral communications. Are there any oral communications for anything that is not on the agenda tonight? All right. I see none. Can I move to the minutes, and are there any edits to offer for these minutes? And if not, may I hear a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Gary. It was a joint effort. A second joint effort.
Anyway, terrific job. There was a lot going on.
There was, there was, and I felt for them when they were doing it, and they captured it exquisitely. Having thanked them for the joint job they did the month before, I was doubly pleased. So we're moving right along, and that takes us to the item of old business, the Open Space Maintenance Subcommittee, a recommendation for subcommittee and committee consideration. So just a quick debrief, and this will be a relatively fast-moving agenda item. At our August 3rd, 2023 meeting, so well over 2 years ago, the full Open Space Committee met and voted to create the Open Space Maintenance Subcommittee, with Nona and Gary representing open space, and Judy Murphy, and then serving Nancy Frary, serving for open space, serving for conservation. They met numerous times, and one of their more important products was a exquisite letter to the town council that I think was written in May of that following year, almost a year later, if recollection serves. In any case, it was a very productive committee, and I think right now I'm going to turn it over to Nona to take the report from here.
Yeah, so the subcommittee, the joint subcommittee has met a couple of times recently, and our joint feeling is that it's time to separate the two halves of the joint subcommittee and go back to the system that we had a few years ago, with the conservation subcommittee focusing on the needs that the town has expressed for identifying maintenance needs on town-owned open space, the scope of work, potential contractors, and what the timing should be, and then freeing the Open Space Committee to potentially form a separate subcommittee, its own subcommittee, to focus on things like oversight of the Open Space Fund and guidelines. And that's basically the system that we used to have. And the only reason that they were merged a few years ago is that there was just really a lot of confusion, a lot of turnover in town staff, and also confusion about how the Open Space Fund could and should be used. So unless there are any objections to that from this committee,
I think that there's a fair amount of
or any discussion.
understanding and a terrific amount of appreciation for all that you were able to bring. And that we all know what work we have to do to continue, but that go separately, I think will make it more efficient. So may I hear a move to disband the subcommittee? Motion?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you, Carter. Second by Gary. And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. So that brings us 5 minutes into the meeting and on to the main course, which is which is going to be our Dorothy Ford Park conversation. So in light of the recent proposal to consider the possibility of locating permanent bathrooms and a new, larger snack shack within the scenic corridor, we're turning to new business item 5A, Dorothy Ford Park and Open Space and Alpine Road Scenic Corridor. Before committee discussion, I want to just cover how we're going to handle the flow tonight. We're going to do a fairly brief overview. I'm going to trust that most of you are pretty steeped in the discussion so far that has been presented quite expertly. Thank you, Karen and Patty, for being here, and Darcy for being here. So between staff and Parks and Rec that was presented to the Town Council on October 23rd. So we'll do a relatively brief, high-level 6 to 7 slide overview presentation. I think that's 6 slides, actually. Then we'll turn to committee questions around the dais. Following that, and those questions can be both related to just simple points of fact, because we've got a lot of fact gatherers here, and also deeper questions where we're doing thoughtful trade-offs of one thing for another. Public comment then will follow that before we bring it back to the committee for full discussion. I wanted to keep in mind the just posted like an hour ago, a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the ASCC to come this Monday night at 6 o'clock. They'll be discussing the same subject or a larger piece of it. So as you hear tonight's presentation and questions, there's an opportunity to use some of the discussion period to identify those key questions that we surface here amongst us to forward to the Planning Commission and ASCC for consideration. At that, the October 22nd Town Council meeting, I just want to go over the questions that the council considered and distinguish them from the questions that we're going to consider tonight. But those questions that the Town Council has already weighed in on, or the four members who were present that night, were: should the town move forward to a concept design phase with cost estimates to replace the portable restrooms and snack shack at Dorothy Ford Park? Second, should the town consider the current site as one alternative? And that current site, we'll get more specific about that during the overview. Should the town designate this as a PV fund, Portola Valley Fund activity, that being a separate fundraising arm? And fourth, shall a group of the Planning Commission, the ASCC, and Parks and Rec be formed as we move forward to assess locations and costs? So those are the questions that are the background for the presentation, that sit in the background of the presentation or review of where we've been. And as we look forward tonight, the Open Space Committee will be reviewing this proposal from the standpoint of, first, the committee's stewardship responsibility for Dorothy Ford Park open space that shares the parcel with the baseball field. Second, the principles of the general plan. And third, the parcel's significance within the recently designated priority conservation. And I see Catherine McGill here, who can represent us rather well there. So thank you for coming. With that, a call for the slides. Yeah. So what you're seeing tonight, whether you be home or in the audience, it's taken from the October 22nd presentation. And this is just to ground us in for any of you who've not been on site recently to Dorothy Ford Park, it's a good opportunity to go and see for yourself. But the portable potties are in high use. So they certainly are meeting an important need. And the, collection of garbage cans next to them doesn't make a very friendly impression. So I think that between the two of those, there's a lot of room for improvement. The picture serves that purpose. The current use of those, it is not baseball season. Baseball season starts prime season from March into the first week of June. But these are getting a lot of heavy use right now from those members of the public that use the parking lot. And there are quite a lot of members of the public that are using those parking lot. I'm not so sure whether the cyclists and the hikers are using them as often as I notice those people who are arriving and parking there, whether they're staying a short hour for lunch or longer. And then to the right, you can see the current and existing snack shack. That's a 103 square foot snack shack. It is sitting on no foundation, a fact that we established at the town council meeting. And because of that, there is a battle with rats and vermin. And so we understand some of the concerns there. So we are now looking forward. I think I'm going to handle this. I have this next slide over to Nona to walk us through.
Okay, so this slide is essentially a reminder of what the layout of Dorothy Ford Park is. And on the left is an aerial view. The brown band, this brown shading along Alpine Road, is the 75-foot setback from the road right of way for the scenic corridor. The green shading is the 55-foot setback from the top of Los Trancos Creek bank. The right side shows the same features on a hillshade image. And on both images, you can also see sort of dashed or dotted lines, which are the Dwight Crowder Path and the Alpine Trail. The setback lines, I included at the bottom the municipal code requirements for the scenic setback and also for the creek setback, just so you know where those numbers came from. Another thing that this shows is the yellow hashing, which is the deed restricted area for the baseball field. The deed restriction, as I understand it, expires in 2031. And it's within that perimeter. So any questions on this? Okay.
Then moving to our third slide. This is a possible future that you're looking at here. The picture on the left are 2 ADA compliant bathrooms. And the photograph on the right, a little bit hard to make out, but let me walk you through it. It shows 2 ADA compliant bathrooms on the left side. On the far right side, the proposed new kitchen that is approximately the same size as the 2 ADA compliant bathrooms. And between the two of them, a fairly large closet and water heater area. The overall dimension of the 2 ADA compliant bathrooms pictured on the left would be similar to that drawn, just those 2 bathrooms. And that would amount to about 115-ish square feet. Whereas the entirety of the plan on the right measures approximately 340 square feet. So approximately 3 times the size of the picture on the left. And that would be the possible future that is proposed here. This too was a slide presented at the October meeting. So it's essentially to give you a sense of relative scale. And now we'll go back to positioning.
Okay, so the last slide was not a proposal or a plan. It was a suggestion, right, in terms of that layout. And the same is true of this slide.
I'm just looking at Terry for a second. Maybe, is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment? Yes, would you speak to the podium then?
So, excuse me, I'm Karen Askey from Parks and Rec. And the overall dimensions of the building to the exterior, so it includes the whole exterior walls and such, is 17 by 20. So that's a total of
Sorry, which
300.
building? We're talking about
The design on the right, that is a precast, pre-made, they just bring it in with a crane kind of thing onto a concrete slab. That is a total of 340 square feet.
Correct.
And Betsy, what you said is that the area on the side of the bathrooms was 340 square feet. So that's
Oh,
not quite
If I
right.
said that, that was a mistake.
Right, that's why
I thought I said the bathrooms are about 115 square feet-ish.
They're about, with the exterior walls, with all the stuff you have to put in when you X, they're about 127.5 square feet. And this concession stand with the little window is the same because these are all modular prefab things. And so the area in the middle that has the water heater and that will have janitorial supplies and things like that is about 85 square feet. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So shall we proceed with slide 3? Yeah,
Okay.
or 4?
This is a pair of slides sort of zooming in on the area where the snack shack and the portable toilets are right now. And basically just asking the question, is there a way that new facilities could fit between the two setbacks that we've talked about? So not within the 75-foot setback and not within the 55-foot creek setback. This is not a proposal. This is not a plan. This was just a thought exercise to address that question. And so what is shown on and blown up on the right is just to the east of the scenic corridor setback is 2 ADA bathrooms. So it's basically the dimensions that Karen has already stated. It shows sinks within the bathrooms, which wouldn't necessarily be the case. And as a thought exercise, again, only, we said, well, what if the snack shack were replaced by a food truck, which, you know, food trucks are kind of ubiquitous nowadays. And that would give you an opportunity to put it within the scenic setback because that's part of the parking lot. So it's just a thought experiment to say, how would this work? Would this fit? And, you know, it fits. Whether you think it's attractive or not is another question. And certainly I've talked with Karen and others about their perspective on that. Obviously, everyone's going to have their own perspective. So this, again, this is just a thought exercise to address the question from an open space perspective. Can we honor the 75-foot setback and still provide, you know, food and flush toilets?
And I would like to just add to that just a thought experiment. This is a very powerful moment in the town's process where thought experiments are really valuable additions to the conversation, that we are entertaining many possibilities to choose the one that fits the best this is the time to do it and not to lament that we didn't surface what were other possibilities now. So I encourage that kind of open-minded thinking aloud together as a community as we go forward.
Yeah, there are other ways to, to approach this too, to say, if you don't have to build a snack shack, that's a savings. If you don't have to maintain it, there's savings there too. But that wasn't really why we proposed this, thought experiment.
Well, there are a variety of reasons why maybe a food truck, and maybe we'll discuss that piece later, but
Yeah,
this is
we
to
can
introduce you
discuss
to the ideas. So for the next slide, I wanted to ask our wonderful new member, Del Maxwell, came up with this most intriguing idea that she sent to the town, and I thought it so intriguing that I wanted her to talk a bit about it.
Okay, so what I did when we were talking about this at the last meeting is I went down to Ford Field and snooped around. And I go by there sometimes when I walk down to Ladera. And trying to figure out, oh, here's a snack shack. Okay, we have water coming into the site in a couple of different places at the ballpark. And we also have utilities stubbed in there. And so, okay, that's a good start on things. But then I started thinking about, well, have other people, tackled this particular problem in doing something that's a lower cost alternative? And so I was looking on the internet, of course, and I found this company called the Portland Loo, which customizable unit that was invented obviously in Portland. It can be hooked up to the sewer or it can be standalone without a sewer. And it's a simple design and it's pretty elegant. And what they did is design something for a lot of the urban issues that they have in Portland that we might not have here, but just in case, maybe it's good to have them. The base unit costs about $185,000.
So-
And if you install it with existing plumbing, that adds about another $30,000. And of course, base cost usually means that there are all these add-ons that you can have in there. Different kinds of water or towel. I don't even know. I didn't actually go through the whole exercise of trying to price it out other than the base unit price. And but if you need sewer and water hookups, of course, the cost is going to be higher, and that's something that we're going to have to deal with no matter what, unless we have something that does not require water. And I don't think that's really what we want. At any rate, I provided some links in this thing that I sent to the town council at their last meeting. And it turns out that these units are being used in a lot of places around the country. They're very easy to clean. They use materials that resist graffiti and things like that, although I don't think that's kind of the same problem that we have in Portola Valley as opposed to Portland. So that is something that I just wanted to propose as a possible solution.
Can we back up just one second? So just going back to this slide, if you look at the two restrooms here that are side by side, if you put two Portland Loos there, they are longer but narrower than these units. So they're long enough that if you have a stroller with a baby, you can wheel it right in there with you. And they're longer because the janitorial unit with a hose and everything is on the back. So longer but narrower.
Meaning we wouldn't need the 85 square foot.
Yeah, it's definitely
Closet.
ADA compliant.
It also is intriguing just in terms of the picture. The louvers are obviously excellent ventilation, and it creates it's less imposing than a block structure. So it, in that sense, blends in and looks quite park-like. Pretty neat. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we would have to put those particular logos on ours if we wanted to.
No.
actually use it.
We can put Portola Valley Little. All right, and then maybe at a later point, or maybe at a later point, okay, we'll go to the next slide, and that next slide is the verbiage. Oh, I didn't read out the municipal code that came on an earlier slide. You put that in there. Sorry, I'm going to go backwards for a moment just to call out the, at the base here. Will you? And do that first, and we'll do the 6th slide next. I'm happy to if you don't want to. Okay. Comes from our municipal code, chapter 18, which is a planning chapter 18.58.020, special setback lines, scenic. D2, Alpine Road, no structure shall be located closer than 75 feet to the right-of-way of Alpine Road in that section of Alpine Road lying between the northerly town limits and Portola Road. The next two items are .020 and .030. The following creeks are subject to the creek setback provisions in this chapter. Los Trancos Creek is the first named. A3 is parcels of 2.5 acres or more are 55 feet from top of bank or 60 feet from the ordinary high water mark. So that leads in then to our last slide, and that being the general plan. And Terry, if you led off with the objectives 3302, there are then 5 other, and I'm just going to go around the room and ask each one of you. I left a piece of paper in front of you, or you can read from the screen to read from this, because I want to plant in our minds that portion of the general plan that we're going to be considering as we weigh off the scenic corridor against the appetite to locate this in one place or another.
All righty. So just to reiterate, this is from the Town of Portola Valley General Plan regarding scenic roads and highways element. Objectives 3302. To provide guidance regarding the maintenance of the scenic qualities of our major roads, because Portola Valley is a place of unusual natural beauty. All roads in Portola Valley can be considered scenic. However, it is possible that the pressure of increasing development and the resultant traffic could lead to the erosion of the aesthetic quality for roadsides if care is not taken.
Thank you, Terry. Jackie's going to read 3309.
So local scenic roads, 3309. The 2 roads designated in this plan as local scenic roads are Alpine Road and Portola Road.
3310, Alpine Road is now a route of great natural beauty and variety. The creeks it follows through the foothills are lined with tall trees, and the countryside has kept much of its rural tranquility. The mountain canyon is still wide, and new views open up at each turn of the road. A superb scenic route already exists. It is threatened by change. The challenge is to find and pursue the ways that can protect and preserve this route through the mountains for our present enjoyment and the delight of future generations.
The town has, since its incorporation, endeavored to protect the scenic quality of the Alpine corridor from a policy statement adopted in July of 1969.
Okay. The policy of the town of Portola Valley has always been to maintain a tranquil rural atmosphere and to preserve a maximum of green open space. The Alpine Scenic Corridor should be developed in accordance with the policy. The natural look and feel of the land between the road and the creek should be maintained. Trees and natural growth should be preserved and increased. Recreational uses should be in keeping with a peaceful and rural atmosphere.
In May 1971, the town adopted the Alpine Parkway Plan, subsequently named the Alpine Scenic Corridor Plan, as part of the town general plan, which includes detailed description of the road and of related design policies, see Part 6. Special provisions to implement the plan and to protect the corridor include: 1, open space zoning for sections of the corridor; 2, special setback lines along a major portion of Alpine Road; 3, an open space program which does and should include recommendations for land acquisition and regulations pertaining to the corridor; 4, the recreation element and the trails and paths element, which include proposals for trails and paths in the corridor.
Thank you very much. All right, so having so seated our minds, we turn back to the 3 questions on the table, or any others that come to your mind. Jackie, do you want to start? You don't have to. Yeah, keep going? Okay. Do I have any volunteers? Let's start that way. Any
Sure.
volunteers? Thanks,
I'll
Carter.
volunteer. And for complete disclosure, I'm on the ASCC and we'll be, seeing this again on Monday, as part of a study session with the Planning Commission. So I'll hold my, design comments, to those issues related to, the ASCC. And, tonight I'll really talk about this from an open space standpoint. I think the need, is clear, for, the toilets. The town is spending, an extraordinary amount of money monthly, on the maintenance and the service and the rental, associated with the plastic, barns that we see out there that are unsightly. I think the baseball league needs the support, of the town in the form of the snack shack. I'm not a fan, of the food truck, concept as much as it potentially, avoids the issues here. I think there's an opportunity, to solve the problem, the problem and the needs associated with toilet rooms, and the snack shack while, conforming, to the setbacks and actually, producing a more efficient, response to parking than what actually ends up, happening out there. But I also have, a couple of questions. The parking lot and the toilet rooms right now, are being used more often, by the renter of the parking lot. And I'm not sure how the rental of the parking lot is working right now. Because the Alpine Inn, my understanding is, has their employee parking, in that parking lot. Because that parking lot is, receiving exponentially more use, on a daily basis, than it ever has, before. So I do think that there's some cross-pollination, that, related to that, to that other use in town that is, so incredibly effective and successful, that I do think, needs to potentially participate in this. But the long and the short is that I think that my recommendations would be to, have the use comply with the setbacks, and that other funds, be located and found, to, as it relates to, parking and some of the, increase in use, associated with that rental.
I'm a real softie as a chair, but we're trying to pose questions and then we'll discuss at the end. So thank you very much for your full forthcomingness.
You got both from me.
I know. We'll take it on repeat. Thanks very much for starting us off. By any chance, do you want to go next, Del? Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. The question I was looking at was, should the town designate this as a Portola Valley Fund activity? Do you mean by that as something that we're going to start fundraising for? Or do we already have pledges and commitments to this particular, potential pledges and commitments to this project?
We can get specific answers for that later, but the answer is yes and yes. The
Mhm.
PV fund, there's a trio of John Goulden, John Richards, and Sarah Doherty who have volunteered to fundraise for town, specific town priorities. And this was designated as a town priority at the last town council meeting as far as I understood it.
Mhm.
No? Okay, so we're going to get clarification on that?
Hi, I'm Patty Dews with the Parks and Rec. So PV Fund does not do any fundraising. So the PV Fund is the engine. Think of it as a GoFundMe. They provide the tools, the background bank information, the donation capability, the form that you get to say you just donated, nonprofit is deductible. They are the engine. The fundraising will be totally the responsibility of Little League, Parks and Rec,
Okay.
you know, whatever.
Thank you for that important clarification and my misunderstanding. Good question. Thank you. Are you good or you're thinking? You're thinking? Okay. Terry, would you?
Um, I'm grateful that we're considering this opportunity now, in part because this opportunity for support from the state grant, I think, represents a timely opportunity that we should consider very seriously. And the opportunity to put in place some a more permanent infrastructure under any scenario seems like something that we should take very seriously. So I'm grateful that we're willing to tackle this with our partners in the town and our community.
Thank you, Terry. There being no questions that I heard there. Yeah. Gary.
Okay, I do have a question, because the notion of moving this into the parking area, if we invade the parking lot, how much do we know about the parking during, well, baseball games, but whatever other things that are going on?
How
I
much do
see
we know?
that parking lot pretty full, almost 24/7 every time I pass by. So other people are apparently using it. We were thinking it's staff for Zots, or people are going to Zots, maybe. I don't know. So the question would be, can we afford to invade the parking lot for this small space, several few hundred square feet?
Can we afford to
So-
what? Invade?
Invade.
Uh-huh,
the
I see,
parking area.
with building.
That would be my question.
Okay, thank you.
Without.
I think I heard also embedded, who are all these people who are parking here? Did I hear that question?
Well,
It's a little similar to Carter's.
I hate to bring this up of having to study how a parking lot is
Yeah.
used. 'cause that
You're
can
you're
take-
the study
That can,
expert.
that can take forever.
Yeah, right.
I think we may have to just jump in and say, we can afford 500-600 square feet.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
So the basic question is, what are the impacts if we use, invade the parking area?
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Jackie, have you got anything before?
Yeah, so, I think like most everyone else, I think this is a really good idea and an important issue. I want to make sure that we keep in mind not only the setbacks based on what the regs call for, but the practical reality that if we ever have to enlarge Alpine Road, that this structure, which is intended to be a long-standing structure, allow that to happen and not have to be moved. So that's something that came up in discussion. I wanted to, it resonated with me from a practical standpoint. In addition to, of course, I think the setbacks are absolutely critical.
Okay, thank you very much. I hear you loud and clear. No, I have exactly one question. Do you have more than that? Shall I just put mine out there? I could clean up, but you're a much better cleanup act. Okay, my question is really about balancing costs and understanding and distinguishing short-term costs from long-term costs. One question or one statement that I have heard made from a few different corridors is how much more expensive it would be to build in the parking lot. In other words, where it is permissible to park according to our general plan and according to the municipal code. So we would not be in violation, that we would be considerably more expensive. I don't want to make any assumption of that nature. I'd want to do profound fact checking of that nature in casual conversations that I've had. It does not appear to be that much more expensive, as in the tune of a few $1,000s more expensive to locate it in the parking lot rather than to locate it in the scenic corridor. So I would like more information there so that we can kind of come to terms with what the cost trade-offs are. But then in terms of the other trade-offs, the short term and the long term, if we just narrowly looking at Dorothy Ford Park, we need to balance the experience of the public that is walking by, cycling by, on horseback riding by, and cars driving by, with the experience of people who are parking there year round and playing baseball. And because it might be that from one standpoint, one thing is better, and the other standpoint, something else is better. So I want to take sort of to stand on both sides of the fence when we're making calls about what's aesthetic, because it really does depend where you're standing. And then lastly, the long-term, short-term trade-off piece. The general corridor, Alpine Road Scenic Corridor, excuse me, has been a part of our general plan since 1971. It came into being with the Skyline Parkway, and it was a big state effort, a lot of designation, and it served us enormously well for the entirety of my adult lifetime, well before I got here. But I'm the incredible beneficiary of how well cared for it was. We all are the beneficiaries of how well cared for it was. So when we look today at giving up that place, that value that we've stood on for decades, my question is the short-term return worth the long-term cost? And I say that looking both to the past and to the future. That's it.
I want to begin by congratulating Parks and Rec on a great proposal and on raising a bunch of money already. And I also want to thank Karen and other members of that committee for talking with me, explaining how they feel about things and why they feel so strongly about things. I wanted to come at this from having done a huge amount of research into Ford Field and to raise what I think are hard questions that I think are worth addressing. and haven't been raised yet. So I come from this to this from the perspective of, the slide. Can it fit between the two setbacks, and should it go there, or should we consider putting something within the scenic setback? The general plan, the municipal code make it really clear that it should not be in the scenic corridor setback. But I can put on another hat and see why, from the perspective of Little League, the current location is really nice. And so I've tried to sort of take the opposite of my normal position and say, can I convince myself that that's where it should go? I can think about that a little more clearly if I separate the bathrooms from the snack shack, probably for reasons that'll be a little clearer in a minute. With the bathrooms, I say, in some ways, it will serve more people better if the bathrooms are in the scenic corridor, because they'll be closer to the trail, to the Dwight Crowder path, which is heavily trafficked, and it would make them more accessible to them, as well as serving people who are parking in the parking lot. When I started thinking along those lines, I said, well, if it's in the scenic corridor, then it doesn't even have to be on that side of the baseball field. It could be on the other side of the baseball field, where the Dwight Crowder path comes inside the fence line. And so you could put the bathrooms pretty much adjacent to the paved path and make it accessible to everyone there. I'm not advocating that. I'm really just trying to raise all kinds of questions. Yeah. And so my question is will the architect, the landscaper, whoever does the consideration of locations, and will they think outside the box as much as we're trying to? I think that's our goal, is to say, can we meet multiple objectives at once? And what kind of thinking does it take to find those solutions? I also have some sort of fundamental questions about the snack shack. And I'm not going to come down where I think the bathrooms should ultimately be. I mean, certainly you could make them next to the Dwight Crowder path by moving the paved portion back inside the fence after it goes around the outfield, right? And bring it inside the fence, basically alongside where the snack shack is now. And then it would have equal access for path users as other people. So I don't have a position on that. It's really just a question, will a wide range of possibilities be considered, and what would their trade-offs be? Regarding the shack, I have what I think are sort of fundamental questions. I read the town policy on rental and use of town-owned recreational facilities, and it states food sales are only allowed at the snack shack at Ford Field. And I started wondering, why is that? Does it relate to the deed restriction? And if so, why? I actually have never seen the deed restriction, so I don't know what it entails. And how might that change when the deed restriction expires in 2031? Secondly, I had sort of a sort of basic question about who the snack shack serves. If it's really only being used by Little League, then I guess I have the question of whether there is a precedent or a policy by the town to support a structure, especially one that's going to be in the scenic corridor, that has one organized user? Or is the idea that the snack shack would actually be available to other groups? So any other, say, non-commercial group, a club in town, a student group, a church, whatever, that wanted to sort of use that facility. It's just, I think it's a question of basic fairness. And partly I raised that question because I read through the agenda packet for the meeting and I saw the great letters from Alpine Little League. But nowhere in the proposal could I find the words Little League. And so I don't honestly know if the Snack Shack is a Little League facility or is it intended for broader use by non-commercial entities. So those are the questions that I have been grappling with, to be honest. And I don't have a position yet on the Snack Shack. I have talked to people. I've talked to Steve Erickson. I've talked to Karen, of course. And, and I've talked to other coaches of other sports about how they feel about Ford Field having a dedicated Snack Shack. And I get that this is about a culture that is specific to baseball. That's the understanding that I came away with. And I think town culture is really important. And tradition is really important. So I don't know how to weigh that in the open space context, but I think we all recognize that that's important. So those are my questions. They're basic questions about the Snack Shack and policy, and then how we look at those things in the bigger mix.
Super powerful questions. Thank you very much, committee. And with that, we're going to go to Darcy first, who has her hand up. We're going to take any questions from those present and then anyone online.
Oh, yes. Hi, sorry to
Darcy, thank
interject.
you for being with us.
Smith.
Our very hardworking town
I apologize,
manager.
Mayor Judith Haskell, who's your liaison, couldn't be here tonight, so I'm going to pretend to be here, but not. First of all, thank you for your questions and comments. And I don't know if we have a lot of public comments. I don't want to slow them down, but I will say that the real credit goes to Patty and Karen, who brought this idea to me as it was, I don't want to say overlooked, but put on hold in our town budget because of our very constrained budget. But they shared with me that there's a gem out there, which is the $180,000 in state grant. So I started researching, like many of you, I heard our great researchers, what's the deadline? Could it be extended? Because it actually was awarded to the town in 2020 and 2021. So it goes way back. But what the state told me is use it or lose it in the next basically 2 years and 2 months. They don't think it will be extended. It was extended during COVID, but this relates to a bond measure at the state level. I think goes back to 2018. Interestingly, a similar bond measure was used to renovate Ford Field back in the 2010s. I will tell you, because I had a lot of questions, could the bond be used for other things? I just want to emphasize that as of right now, we are approved for the full $180,000 for the bathroom. And that was a decision made almost 4 years ago. And I always, like, as a new town manager, want to respect the past decisions and not raise them up again. So we're doing a lot of research, but I just am here to say we are in the baby stages, or we're in the first inning. So we had the great council meeting where they gave feedback. And now we're at the point where I'm trying to scope the first phase of work, which is definitely hiring a landscape architect and a civil engineer. And I'm looking at Carter because he's nodding his head. Yeah. So that was what we are working on now. I think will be instrumental in where we land, which is a preliminary analysis of building sightings with locations and estimated costs, because a big issue here is 180 plus donations going to be enough? Or as Dell has pointed out to me in places around here, this is shocking, but restrooms can be up to $1 million. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And obviously we're very cost conscious. So the team is working on an RFP that will go out, I hope, in a few weeks to bring on a qualified landscape architect and a civil engineering team. We'll start with a survey, right? That's number one. A topo survey with all the utilities, the top of the creek bank, the property line, so we can actually measure both the creek and the view quarter setback with absolute, engineering precision. Then site reconnaissance, so the architects and their team will walk the field, look at trees, look at any other existing conditions in the field, make an existing conditions plan, and then dive deeper into these 3 different locations. We will definitely be looking at breaking the buildings up, potentially moving them apart, trying to look at through the lens of how much that might increase cost. And maybe it's minimal, but maybe it's a lot. But the most important thing that I think will come out of that, and that obviously our finance director and our council will want to estimate a probable construction cost for 3 options, and including bringing the buildings together, maybe the Portland Loo option, a prefab option. I think the cost here could be, I don't know, $400,000 up to like 1.5 million. I mean, I have worked on bathrooms that get into that range. So it can be, and the big issue here, look at Carter again, is sewer connection costs. I don't know how far away we are from the sewer line or the water line. I don't know if they need to be upgraded, but some of you who've worked on your homes in town know that that is a very complicated thing. So we're going to start with that next step. Again, the plan is to get your feedback, get the feedback from the Planning Commission, ASCC, continue on this path. But the most important thing this team needs to do is get the RFP out there and get a qualified landscape architect and engineer and surveyor under contract doing some preliminary work to then return to council and publicly release estimated costs to see, can we continue to get into the 2nd inning and the 3rd inning and the 4th inning. But I appreciate all the support I've heard. I would say that this project will serve the entire town and obviously be important to any visitors running our trails and paths. I don't think anyone here can argue that it's needed. I think we just obviously want to be very thoughtful about how we get to the 9th inning in the game, into the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we are in a tight time frame too, I'll say that. I don't know if Karen wants to say anything else, but I really appreciate that she's leading the effort and championing. She spent countless hours, maybe over 100 now on this, and Patty as well.
Probably more.
And it takes a village, they always say that, but this is true. So I just appreciate all of you to contribute and share your thoughts with me. We are, in the brainstorming stage, but I feel like just slow down a little bit and we will come back to you when we have this more detailed information to share with you.
Well, the slow down piece I hear, and I think it's easier to add things to building a recipe at the earlier stages where they can be incorporated seamlessly rather than arriving too late. It's very hard to find the perfect moment. So I sometimes err on getting there a little bit sooner rather than later. Thank you very much for coming here this evening and joining us. As long as you're at the podium, is there anything else that you would like to share with us, newsworthy for the Open Space Committee?
Wow. I mean, I could spend all night up here talking about newsworthy things. The council did meet in closed session about the Fogarty property, and I don't have an update on that. It was publicly noticed, so I'll tell you that. And the background with that because it's come before you. And then the other thing is just that the town continues to look at our priorities and also looks at our fund balance for open space. So as we go into 2026, I presume you'll be working on your budget. And so just know that your work on that is much appreciated.
We're not a very big high spending committee, but
No,
we will
no.
look at our budget. Thank you. Thank you very much. Karen, and do you want to go next? Yeah, Patty.
Okay, so thanks for having me up here again. I have a couple questions before we start. How many of you actually watched the town council presentation and the discussions and everything? Okay. There was a lot in there, and I feel like maybe it would be really beneficial to watch that or to come to the planning and ASCC meetings, and you can see the whole thought process and all of that. The other question I have is, how many of you have played Little League or been to Little League games or have kids that play Little League? Okay, so, pardon? Oh, because there's, the other thing that I'd like to mention that Darcy didn't mention is there are nuances to the game, such as foul balls get hit, where a home run hit, as well as the fact that the games are about 2.5 hours long. So Nona, I can't answer all. I thought that was a great question. Your questions are great, but I can tell you that a baseball game lasts a heck of a lot longer than watching my kids play their water polo game, which is 4 7-minute quarters. So there's a reason for some things and there's tradition and all of that. But what I want to stress is that, well, first of all, I love the fact that you all guys are all in favor of a restroom and a flush restroom. That's awesome. I mean, we looked at vault restrooms, but because of the creek and because people are there for hours, things like that might not make sense. So
Karen,
thank you.
what, I missed what you said. You're all in favor of a bathroom and a blank bathroom. I missed that.
Flush
flush.
restroom.
At first I thought you said plush.
No, no, just
Thank
flush.
you.
And speaking of that, I just want to give you guys 3 words that we're aspiring to: economical, expedient, and efficient. Okay, those are our goals. So in the town, and I also want to stress that we didn't make a proposal, we had a study session. And I think it's really important to understand the differences, and there were concepts presented. And Darcy mentioned we were in an early stage. We're in a very early stage. But what the town council did agree to on October 22nd to this, it's a town capital improvement project. It meant for public use. And they can actually make the choice to do what they want. And I think Carter knows this as well. But they said, yes, we should start activities to facilitate a new restroom and snack shack. Yes, we should explore as one of our options looking at building in the setback. The other 2 options that are on the table are the parking lot. The question is exactly where it would have to go. And the other one is the open space area on the other side past where foul balls may hit. Those are all out there. Nobody's made any decisions about anything. And the third thing that they did say is, yes, we should utilize the Portola Valley Forum as one arm of our fundraising. So again, we are not at the design stage or the locations selection. It's really important to understand that. And the process is that the council made it very clear that the Planning Commission and the ASCC are really valuable to this town. And quite honestly, they've been underutilized recently. So the first step is to go to the Planning Commission and the ASCC and present to them and hear if they know of any red flags, if there's any concept ideas. We want to start with them instead of coming to them later and getting told, oh, you should have thought of this, you should have thought of that. So that's the first step. The second step, as Darcy mentioned, is once we get that input, is to hire the landscape architect, the right professionals to figure out these concepts and the actual cost with them. Then that information will get shared with the appropriate committees, the Conservation Committee, the Open Space Committee, the Trails Committee, and we'll hear the feedback. But we will have actual design and costs. We'll have so much more to make a decision. So that is essentially the process that we're at. And then I wanted to just add a couple, I heard some comments. In terms of the evacuation planning, the expansion of Alpine Road in that area from Westridge down to, I think it's Ladera, is to add a 5-foot buffer to Alpine Road. It's not to widen it to a 3rd lane. So that's important to understand. I want to throw it out there so that everybody has the same information as we move forward. The other thing that is really important is that we don't know what all is required in terms of ADA accessibility. And I'm going to say, I've read that you need to provide parking if you have an ADA bathroom. I've read that you need to provide paths. And so the question will tie into our decision of location. And then the last thing that I heard, I wanted to clarify that baseball season goes from late February, usually into July, like the July 4th weekend. And then there's fall ball, which is September through November. So it is used by baseball a fair amount of the year. And I think that's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Karen. Patty, I think you wanted to say a little something.
Well, unfortunately, I always have something to say. Karen and Darcy, thank you. I will be very brief. Just a couple quick notes. First of all, again, I really want to thank this committee for taking this on and discussing this. Even though it's early in the process, I think it is good to give visibility to it, to get people thinking about it. I would caution us all to, not get too excited about Googling all the different bathroom features that are out there. I know I myself do not want to design a bathroom, even if it's plush. I don't expect the Parks and Rec to do it. I don't expect actually the Open Space Committee to do it or anybody else. Ideas are great. Input is fantastic. I think we should step back, and I think that's what Darcy talked about. Slowing down is step back and let the professionals, look at the situation and come back and tell us what they think, would be the best solution. That's where I think we have to be a little more patient about the process. The other quick thing, Darcy mentioned the grant. We do have, a time frame that we have to deal with. So speed is not of the essence, but it's something that we need to keep in mind. And so we're going to be doing a lot of things in parallel. Design, fundraising, we're actually going to start because we need to think about, what would we need to do to get the funds that we need to have available to us. And I think that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Patty. And just one remark about the speed with which you need to act, which anyone who's done any level, Karen asked for a raise of hands, or who's done Little League at some level with kids or herself. I'll bet you if I asked how many people have been involved in construction around here, we'd mostly all raise our hands, and we all knew that it takes it takes at least 2 years, unless you're in Portola Valley, in which case it takes longer. So, so I get the efficiency and the wanting to act quickly, and that's really why we are here now. Because also the timing of our meetings, the open space meeting typically happens every couple of months. I mean, we can have special meetings, but we were having this one, so it's much better to help you out and offer you what we can at an early stage, particularly on location, because that will be one of the early decisions to be made. So I hear both slow down and act quickly at the same time. And I understand the inconsistencies of life. I've got lots of them too. But balancing act, we'll do our best. So with that, I want to, do we have raised 2 hands? Do we have anyone online that would like to make a comment? If so, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. I think we're good there. Thank you. Then bringing it back to committee for committee discussion and any particular questions or comments that you would like to hand down to the Planning Commission,
I have a question.
the SEC.
Given this potential grant money, what is the timeline for that, and what do we have to do in order to secure that?
Well,
grant?
that I will answer the first part of it, but I would like the answer to the second part of this. The first part of it is that the $180,000, Darcy said at the town council meeting that it is, she's checked it 6 ways to Sunday, and it's committed. The issue is that the construction needs to be complete by January 1st of 2028, after which time the state has 6 months to say, yes, here's your money, after the approval process. The question that I had is that the town must come up with 20% matching fees. And I had assumed, I think wrongly from what I read in the materials, that it was 20% of 180,000. It looks like it might be higher number than 20% of the 180,000. But that's one question. And then the other question, something else that I read, and here, there's a document out there from 2012 that undoubtedly had to do with the last fundraising for the field itself. But at that time, the town was asked to come up with their 20% at the front end, and that money was the first money to be spent. And so if you have any clarity about those two questions, I think it's of interest.
Yes, and Karen has to go. She's late.
Karen, thank you for being here. No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
We're in still capable hands.
Yes, so I have been researching, as I said, the costs and everything. And there is a 20% required match of the total cost, which concerned me at first, but then I would just put it into a different lens. That can be donations, so trying to minimize town costs, direct costs. But let me just give you an example. If the project was, let's say, $300,000, then the state would pay 180 and we have to make up the rest anyways. So that's 120, right? Even if the match was only 20%, it could be donations. They've confirmed that in writing. So I guess if you can just clarify.
Yeah, the reason why it's interesting to me to know how much we have to come up with is really because I think it will exceed the 180 as you're implying. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be more than that. But if we have to come up with it at the front end, because sometimes, you can imagine why they'd want us to be all in before they come in.
Mhm.
And that would just be something to know about so that we know what kind of a fundraising, because as we expedite this process, that's a pretty high threshold for a, all in right now. If you're going to pay the bills with fundraised money, as I understand, no burden to the town. I've heard that a number of times, no burden to our town that is operating at deficit levels right now. So
Well,
I thought that was a,
Risk. I think what you're getting at, if I can elaborate, is just the risk involved and also the fundraising. You need a goal to fundraise, right? I mean, love to get, as much as we could, but this is a pilot project to some extent for PV Fund and the town to see if we have we haven't done a big project since the town center, and that was 2010, but many of you might remember that campaign. And there was also the millennial open space campaign that raised almost $1 million. So we have done campaigns in the past. But the money would need to be essentially in the bank before we sign a construction contract to build it. So the way the town builds projects is that we go through an elaborate public bidding project, almost like if you were building a house, remodeling your house, right? You go out to contractors, you get a few bids. And then what we are required to do as a public agency is just ensure we can pay all the bills. If that makes sense. Yeah. So the real deadline to have all the money and know how much it's going to cost and have, we'll be honest, a healthy contingency, because most costs right now, especially around construction materials, are difficult to pin down, is that we need to know the cost, put it out to bid, and then lock in a contract, if that makes sense. And that is awarded by the council at a public meeting. And that is when we would need the money. And to be honest, that's probably 9 to 12 months out. Carter, I think, looking at you. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe then 9 to 12 months to build. The good thing with a prefab, I will point out, is that they bring it in on a flatbed truck. So yeah, the utilities is going to be the hard work with trenching and getting all the things in. But
Got
the
it.
actual installation of this relatively small structure could be
thank you.
fast. Does that make sense though?
Yeah, yeah.
So
that
when
does.
we award the construction contract and execute it, that's when we would need the money in the bank. Until then, pledges would also be something that we can show the council, in 6 months or 3 months that we're making progress. And can I just correct one thing about the budget comment?
Yes.
Budget. Yeah. So my comment about the budget wasn't your committee budget, but you pointed out to me that last year there was a recommendation by this committee to use a specific amount of open space funds on,
On open space properties?
yeah, open space properties. And so that is the
Well,
distinction.
We enumerated, you know, a spring down, Frog Pond. I mean, we're more specific than I just was.
Yes, yes. But if you look in our budget, which is posted on the town council website,
Oh.
that was not approved in the budget. And
Oh, I
so,
see. So you've just jumped topics. I thought you were going to talk about something budget related to,
but I just wanted to
Board.
mention that. We can revisit that later if you
oh,
guys.
let's do.
Different
That's,
meeting,
I'd
yeah.
rather prepare for that meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Darcy. It seems as though, Dana, did we skip over you during questions? Dana, if you want to unmute yourself and you have a question before we go to committee discussion, please speak now. Not hearing from you, I will move it forward then.
No, I don't have nothing to say, Betsy, because we're gonna hear this on Monday night.
Great.
But I
Thanks for
found
sharing.
Nona's comments tonight pretty compelling, and I mean, just all of it. I support the project, so I'm excited about it.
Great. Thank
I'll
you.
hear it Monday. Thank you.
Okay. Then shall we start again as we did before? Carter, would you like to begin the discussion period with a?
I really made my comments. I think that, you know, our issues, you know, should not be around what the solution is, you know, but, you know, what we would hope for, you know, from a philosophical standpoint, you know, from the open space, you know, committee's point of view. And I think that, you know, I think we should opine about, you know, the need and the use, you know, which I think is, you know,
About the need and the
use.
use. Thank you.
And kind of what the rules of engagement from the open space standpoint should be, you know, and let, you know, the other commissions, you know, deal with the details associated with that.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Thank you. Dell?
Well, I'm all in favor of looking at these multiple sites to see which one would be the most appropriate to put something down. I'm sort of agnostic right now as to what the right solution is, so I'm very open to hear what everybody has to say. And I don't want to weigh in on that until I've heard more about the possibilities for it. I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to raise the money for this project. It's something that we really need in town, and I think it's something that everybody can get behind. That's going to be a positive asset for everyone, and I don't anticipate there being too many arguments about where we need to put things, because I think there's wiggle room for trying to figure out the right solution. And it's going to be more expensive than we think.
Isn't that, never seen a construction project that wasn't.
I guess I would just add, I appreciate everyone's comments, but particularly Nona and Darcy's comments about, and I'm not saying that this is what Nona was trying to recommend or anything, but to think about the bathroom and the snack shack as two things, not just one thing, though I can certainly see the logic of combining them. And then I'm super glad that Darcy reminded us about the potential cost, and wonder if, you know, how flexible we might be about citing if the cost, because of the proximity to sewer or whatnot, might be influenced by the siting, not just by the, you know, the environment. And then lastly, a wonder or a thought, and this comment is not meant independent of its potential impact on fundraising, and hoping that the fundraising will be as successful as we think it could and should be. But I wonder if the town or would be open or willing to, if it needed to, for timing reasons, lend money from the fund to help support the timing of this project and the access to state grant funds, so that we could be successful even if the fundraising part lagged. And I'm not saying I think it should or would, and I certainly wouldn't wonder about borrowing money from one fund to support this project, if we thought that that would deter the pace and success of new fundraising for what I think is mostly universally thought of as a positive direction we're going. So those are my additional comments from this evening.
Terry, thank you. Gary?
Yeah, obviously, I'm in favor of it, too, like the rest of you. And let's try to get it done so I can see it.
That's extra expediting there.
But before the meeting, I
Or
can't-
actually, I think we should slow it down to have a lot more reason to stick around a long time.
well, I don't have complete control over all of that, but I will say that before I came to the meeting, if the current location is the best place, I would say go for it until I got this piece of paper from you, Betsy, the 8 or 9 reasons why we shouldn't.
Oh,
put
the
it-
general plan, you mean?
Yes.
They're not my
So
reasons.
I
yeah.
was very pleased that Nona was wrestling with the concept of putting it in the right place. So I guess I would modify my feeling of just, if that's the best place, put it there. I'd modify that to, let's put it in the right place, but let's find a place to put it soon and not several years from now.
Mhm.
I just hope the town doesn't have to wrestle with that location. I guess what I'm saying, if it invades the 75-foot setback, that would be okay with me.
Say that again, if,
Yes, if the final decision was to put it within the 75-foot,
within it,
yes, I would,
that you would,
I'd
that
be
you,
fine with
you
that.
could sleep at night.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much, Gary. Jackie? I'm going to go in the same order.
So I think, again, in favor of the project, really beneficial to everyone in the community. I liked the comment you brought up. Let's make sure we think about the general public, the people who are using that purely for parking, as well as the people who are using the park for recreation, as well as the little leaguers. And make sure everyone's needs are taken into consideration. Nona, your idea, I don't know why that just seemed like such an aha moment of, do we really need to keep the two things together, or can we think of them separately? I think is brilliant. And frankly, to me, the flush toilets are an imperative need in that place. So I don't think there's I don't think there's anyone that's objecting to that piece. And in terms of the 75-foot setback, ideally, I would love to, as you mentioned during the town council meeting, adhere to what all of our residents have to adhere to. And I think that's only fair, but if there is no possible way to do it in a cost-effective manner, then we need to consider the alternative.
Thank you, Jackie. And because Nona did such a good cleanup job last time around, I'm going to go next and then let Nona speak last,
I have one more comment for
Please.
cleanup.
please.
Um, as an architect that deals with the disabilities, the Americans with Disabilities Act
Mm-hmm.
and accessibility throughout the state, I think the committees and the commissions, you should be cognizant of how much more the accessibility is likely to cost than the actual toilet rooms. Yeah, it's quite a large site. Yeah, and you're talking about accessibility to and from, the stands, the dugouts, the batting cage, the trails. Um, I could see this, I could see an enormous amount of urbanization that I don't think, this committee or the other committees, would be envisioning for Portola Valley, but might be a slippery slope, that is required by, the state building code and the Americans with Disabilities Act that oh, would be less than a lot more than what I think, the public and the citizens of the town would be expecting.
You're talking both design intensity and price.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you. Very good
I'd
point.
kind of like to, I'd like to agree with you on that, because I've been involved with the San Francisco Botanical Garden for a long time, and we've done a lot of renovation in the park there. And we've had to comply with a lot of ADA issues with providing pathways. For example, we built a new nursery, but we didn't find out until late in the process that we had to provide all of these accessible paths all the way from the front entrance down there. And so that wasn't disclosed to us when we were doing our fundraising. So this was sort of an afterthought that added a lot of money to the process. And we just finished a new bathroom also in the San Francisco Botanical Garden, and we had to do a lot of work with accessibility in the stalls inside and also the pathways that go into the restroom from the main accessible pathway. So I think Carter's right about that, that there's some unknown issues and costs at this point about what we would actually need to do once you open the door to building something new.
Well, and it brings up, the point with the RFP, that a segment of the RFP, should be established, to identify that what can be severable, from, a disability standpoint. The Americans with Disabilities Act, has, numeric limits, on what can be, required for private property. Public property, doesn't have, the same limits.
Very interesting. I would think that's quite helpful. I think I recently was reflecting, I think we all know now that when you hold the highest office in the country, that you swear your allegiance to the Constitution. And it made me reflect on, I wish I'd had time to go back to hear the last town council members sworn in. I would have paid a lot more attention to what they're pledging to align themselves with. So I'm speaking about my own imaginary world and what I find the most real thing in this town, which is our general plan. I imagine it figures very large in what they swear an oath to as they take on this job. I take it very seriously, and it's really what got me engaged in this town. The work of this town. I have worked on a number of projects that were related to land use, as we've really struggled to answer so many different needs, confoundingly different needs. And so I want to thank a neighbor for printing out the entirety of our general plan, and it sits in a binder on my desk. So I have easy access to it, and I look at it regularly enough. I want to make sure that if someone's going to say we're going to call a liner as okay, or someone says, let's just get it as close to the 75-foot setback line as possible, those are still their judgment calls. And I think the general plan in my mind is something that we are going to honor. I don't want to say to the ends of the earth. There is a limit. I'm not a black and white person typically, but it makes it a hell of a lot easier if you are. I think the minute we start to open this can, we're going to look back at this moment and have regrets. I don't know how soon or when, but I can start to spin them out right here, right now, but I won't. I think we all have imagination of what kind of developments coming our way and what other opportunities there would be to make such concessions. So I hope you, the deciders at the ASCC and Planning Commission and the Town Council, take this particular job extremely seriously and give it a lot of thought and a lot of deep reading of our general plan and how beautiful Portola Valley is because we have honored it. I will now go to some specific issues that Nona called out. The two building idea, I think, is highly worth pursuing. For one reason, it allows us to take risks at a biteful at a time rather than taking it all on at once. I look nationally at some of the dark clouds that we are facing, and we could have some wild financial swings that could leave us wanting and hurting. So I think that we are so razor thin on this year's budget, and next year's budget is going to be so much worse. I will not take any risk whatsoever. And I think that splitting them into two buildings would allow for that, particularly with something like the Portland Loo, which allows a drop in and a lag time for us to have the money in hand before it arrives and gets dropped in. I also happen to think it's aesthetically going to be less of an eyesore than a very large bulky building is going to be, no matter where we put that building. So I think it could be a win aesthetically, and I think it would absolutely be more prudent. It might cost a little bit more, but you have to buy insurance, and we all willingly buy homeowners insurance and shriek to high heaven when we lose it. So I think it's a very important insurance policy. I think also that anything that we take on, we need to offload the maintenance of that. Let it not fall on the town's coffers. So we have to keep the maintenance issues in mind as we are looking at our relative designs. I think that that's it, although I reserve the right to chime in later after Nona if I think of one more thing, which I probably will.
I'll be brief and then I'll hand it back.
Have to be.
First of all, I want to thank Karen and Patty and Darcy again for the information that they provided tonight and for all of the work that they've done so far, especially Karen and Patty. And secondly, I think I'm hearing from everyone here that we are strongly and unanimously in favor of flush toilets, which I'm also really glad to hear because I think that that is, as Jackie said, imperative. I think there's also support for a concession stand, a snack shack of some kind, and that there are still some questions about that and about the location of where one or two structures would go. I really want to say that I appreciate the spirit with which questions have been asked. My philosophy is always that a good way to be a good colleague is to be a great skeptic. And I'd much rather get hard questions on the table now and questions about philosophy and policy and cost and long-term versus short-term, user groups, all that stuff, because those questions will eventually come up. And now is the time for us to work through those. So I hope my concerns were sort of taken from that perspective that, you know, Patty and Karen are my colleagues, and I want to be a good colleague to them. And I want them to know what the issues are, that if I see them, other people will see them. I've been really deeply interested in this problem. I went through every aerial photograph I could find to see how old that shack is. And I can tell you it's been there since before 1980. The best aerial that I have that goes 65, 68, no shack, but definitely by 1980. So it's an old shack and it has definitely seen better days. On the issue of separate structures, potentially, there is another benefit to that in addition to something I think the things that have already been said, and that is actually fundraising. I think that the people who really want the snack shack will really respond to fundraising for that. And I think the general public, the sustainability advocates, a lot of other people might respond even more to prefab toilets, especially if they're really sustainably designed and would be a sort of a breakthrough for Portola Valley. So I know that there could be greater cost associated with the two-structure design, maybe not, but most likely it seems like there would be. But I still think that we shouldn't view that as a net increase in cost because it could yield more successful fundraising. I think that's it. I think I'll hand it back to Betsy now.
That's okay. You can come back because I remembered what the other, I had another couple of things. One was, I do hope that as the town, usually when we're doing study sessions, there's a list of background information that's provided. And one of the background pieces of information that Nona called out that I too am quite curious is to read the deed restriction, particularly as it expires in 2031, which is darn soon, right? We will barely be open for business. So I hope that we as a community can look at that together. And so thank you for calling that out, Nona. And then secondly, there's the swing for the fences approach, and that I know was one of your bylines of your presentation, Patty and Karen. And then there's the what if we can only get a man on second or a woman on second? And as I think about a fallback, there's the phasing way to approach this, but it also allows us to do remedial work at the existing snack shack. The existing snack shack is grandfathered. I realize it has a problem with rats, but I put down, rat proofing. You can do a variety of things that immediately quell those problems. And it's not going to last perhaps our collective lifetimes, but it will last it will last a bunch of years. And that kind of intermediate solution in a time of great uncertainty that I consider we are in right now, I think I'm not alone on that, is something I would be investigating as a fourth possibility, which is flushable toilets and excellent remedial work on the existing snack shack. So those are my two extra points. Does anyone else have any last minute contributions? Do it. Yes, Carter.
The 2025 threshold at which a public project would necessitate full compliance is $203,611.
200, how much?
203,611.
Whoa.
If the project exceeds that, then 100% compliance is required.
Wow. Thank you, Carter.
Yes.
Oh, Joy. Good work, committee. You guys are awesome. And to wrap it up for tonight. I see it's after 7 o'clock and we do strive to end by 7, but thank you for your extra attention. As we gear up, I don't know whether we will be meeting again this year. It's possible, depending upon how expeditious this project moves, if there's anything else for us to weigh in on. But it may be that we have spoken our most beneficial piece tonight. When we do meet again, I just want to give you a heads up that recently, though the work was committed under Terry Lee's administration here as chair of the committee, recently we posted that our new charter agreement to the town website. Yes, Jean. And as we did that, we noticed that there was an opportunity to do some extra improvements. So any of you who are willing to work on that, please give me a call day after tomorrow. I would be very in favor of working on it with you. Good night, good night, Darcy. Thanks so much. So that's coming soon, and I will be sharing that in a future, just the facts of it in a future email. Any other things that any of you have to say before I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Carter. Thank you, Terry. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much, Patty.
Thanks, everybody.